You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network. For more quality options programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app, available in iTunes and on Google Play. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.
Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody, that music means it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program where we break down all the fascinating, head-scratching, volatile movements out there in the world of crypto trading. So it could be the spot, the futures, in Bitcoin, or in ETH, or in the options, and all those above. All sorts of fun choices. Going to break it all down here for you on the Crypto Rundown. My name is Mark Longo from the old OptionsInsider.com. The old, really the new, the brand spanking new, theoptionsinsider.com. Check out the new coat of paint, the new features up there. Kick the tires and light the fires, as they like to say. And of course, as always, from the old Options Insider Radio Network. If I sound a little bit different, it's coming at you once again from the Southern studio. I'm technically on vacation, but there's so much going on in the world of crypto that I couldn't leave you guys hanging. No. We have to do another show for you guys. So we're going to do a quick breakdown of all the latest happenings in the world of crypto and derivatives and volatility and all that good stuff. So let's get to it with a little bit of the old Bitcoin breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trading activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown. This is the segment where pretty much the name says it all. We break down all the happenings in the world of Bitcoin. Remember on the last show, we were on just the tail end of a whirlwind out there in terms of Bitcoin rallying about 3,000 handles or somewhere in that range, and then coming off yet as almost as aggressively again to the downside. Coming into showtime now, we're off a mere 800 handles from where we were on our last show. Coming to showtime, we were at about 10,217 or so, and we were at about 11,068 on our last show out there. So 800 plus handles out there in terms of downside. But we have seen some interesting swings. You know, we saw it hit pretty much not too long ago what was pretty much a 17-month high of about 13,880. Depends where you look in the futures. I think we're a little bit higher, 13,910, I think. But somewhere in that 13,900 range was pretty much where we saw the high. That was pretty much a 17-month high. And here we are back again now, right back down to the 10,000 level and threatening it. Yet again, signs that, you know, we maybe rallied a little bit too far, too fast. People obviously taking profits, but also maybe people just a little bit overdone, a little bit exhausted out there from this massive rally. And we're starting to see some of those buyers just get tapped out at those higher levels. Not exactly an unforeseen circumstance, given just the meteoric rise we saw in Bitcoin over the past few weeks. People out there who like and watch the technicals are starting to watch to maybe we're going to start seeing this breakthrough back into the triple digits again. You know, we shall see how all that works going forward out here. Well, not triple digits, but of course, you know what I mean out here back into the 9,000 realm, in which case that will be interesting. Interesting to see. Of course, people will be writing and hand-wringing, of course, all the negative articles out there. But that's not exactly unheard of given the massive, massive movement. In fact, June another pretty much meteoric month here. We've been talking, from March on, April, May, and now June have been consecutive, just very strong months out there. June opened up at around 85.5 or so, 85.46. Again, depends on where you're looking, on which platform. And ended the month right around 11,000, about 10,995 up to around 11,000, again, depending on where you're looking at that exact timestamp moment, end of the month, but up right around 2,500 handles. So a good month for all things concerned, even though we did have a sell-off towards the end there. We didn't quite end the month threatening 14,000 the way we were a few weeks ago, but still, yet another winning month, the 5th winning month in a row. That's the longest run since late 2017, right around August or so. So, of course, all this movement to the upside, to the downside, to the upside again, now back to the downside, has translated into some realized volatility, as you might imagine, out there. Last show, remember, we were at about a 65, so the realized vol had actually come off a little bit. We've since seen some big movements out there, and the realized vol shooting back up again, not quite to triple digits, but pretty close, back up to 90% out there right now. So 65% a week ago, 90% right now. Again, all this data courtesy of our friends over there at sk3w.cl. They've been on the show before. I encourage you, check them out. Some of the best stats in the business when it comes to crypto, particularly on the derivatives and on the volatility side of the business. Going out here, looking at the volume we've seen over the past week on big platforms like DaPict on the options side. We saw some decent spikes out there. Remember, most of the days we're seeing sub 30 million on a platform like DaPict, but we do see some big spikes. The 26th, we saw about 85.5 million going up, and on the 27th, about 81.5 million. So some decent spikes over the course of the past week. Of course, that coincides with some of the big moving days over the past week, so not exactly a surprise there. Also worthy of note, we're seeing, remember in the last few shows, we talked about the call to put ratio and how it's been just extravagant to the call side. In fact, it hit a peak. It hit a record of about 73.4%. That was back not too long ago, June 17th here on the show. Last show, it was at about 65.2% this week. It's come off quite a bit. In fact, we're not talking call to put anymore. We're talking put to call because the call to put ratio is 47.4%. So that means puts back in the driver's seat, over 52% of the OI out right now out there. On the put side, again, not exactly surprising. We raced all the way up to almost 14,000. It came right back. You're going to see some calls come off the table in that environment. You're going to see some puts go on the table in that environment. That combo should lead to that pretty much call to put ratio coming in quite a bit, which is exactly what we saw. In terms of open interest, again, out there on DaPict, it was at a record last week of about 635 million. A lot of that has come off the table. A lot of that has also been closed. A lot of it is very short duration out here in the crypto space. We see a lot of action in near duration contracts, and a lot of that came off, and a lot of it has been closed. So we're at to about 403 million as of today. So quite a bit coming off the table from an options open interest perspective. Again, not entirely unforeseen, given the fact that we saw such massive movements. You're going to see people closing things out. Positions are going to go off the table as well. So not quite at record levels, but if we continue walking and rolling, maybe if we break through 10,000 to the downside again, then we might see a lot of new establishing positions out there in the Bitcoin options. Let's move over to the futures here, see what's going on in Bitcoin futures. Another active day out there. The futures off over 2,100 handles out there at CME. Coming to showtime, they were at around 10, a little bit north of where we were out there, about 10.4. So, yeah, they've come off a little bit since then. Let's see. Let's get the most recent quote just to make sure. That brings up an interesting point we're going to get to in a second, too, about the price differentials on some of these venues out here. Coming into right now, partway through the show, we're seeing the futures over there at CME about 10.255. Again, off about 2,300 handles today. So big moves here in the CME Bitcoin futures. The volume surprisingly light, actually, given that amount of movement in the underlying. Not quite 10,000 contracts in that front month July contract, and about 300 in each of the other months. So you're talking not quite 10,000 total. 92 half or so on the front month, and 300 and 366. So not a ton going on out there. You think a day like today, if it had been maybe a few weeks ago, before we'd seen such other big movements, we would see probably 20 odd, maybe 30,000 contracts going up today. Now we've seen a few big 1,000+ point swings in Bitcoin over the past couple of weeks. So the third one, fourth one, maybe it isn't as much of a market mover. Clearly, it's not a big volume driver out there today. Still an active day, but not quite the blow your doors off kind of day they've seen of late. Of course, speaking of the volume they've been seeing out there, over there in the CME Bitcoin Futures, they reached a record last week on the 26th, 1.7 billion in notional value trading. They're kind of getting with the crowd, getting with the program over there in crypto land. Everyone likes to quote things in notional. So CME doing the same thing, not talking contracts, talking notional, with about 1.7 billion in notional. That beats the previous record by over 30%, by over a third. So big move out there in terms of notional value changing hands. I don't here have the previous notional value record, but a big volume. And let's see here. Yeah, about 26,000 contracts going up on the 26th. So a pretty active day out there. We talked about those price differentials. Let's get into that a little bit. Interesting pieces out there in a couple different places, including, I believe, CoinDesk breaking down what they term, a lot of people term out there, the Kimchi premium, the price differential between some Western venues and some overseas venues, particularly in and around Korea and Asia. And we're starting to see that Kimchi premium come into effect. We saw it up to over $1,000 at one point on Sunday, about $1,050. That's the widest it's been since back in February of last year, actually. So that's extremely wide. It has since come in. That was kind of maybe a bit of an aberrant print, but still very wide. Coming into Showtime, it was much less, about half that, about 520. But still, a substantial premium to be trading over there on these Korean exchanges in particular. So worth noting, again, when we talk about prices, it depends on the venue we're looking at that exact moment. So there's going to be a little bit of a price discrepancy between one of the big venues, let's say a Kraken or a Coinbase versus the CME future versus what's going on over there on Deribit and BitMEX and everything else. There's a lot of different prices, which makes it attractive. Quite frankly, it did a lot of the pros in this space to see a lot of ARB opportunities, gets people a little bit excited. And I think we're seeing that again. I don't know. This Kimchi premium has already come in pretty much by about 50%. So I don't expect it to be around for too much longer, but still fascinating to see that in this modern era where prices are arbed in the millisecond time frame, and if anything gets out of whack by even a few fractions of a percent, they are arbed to death instantaneously in things like cash equities and options and futures. And yet here we are in crypto, and these types of price discrepancies can still exist, which is always fascinating to the hardcore old school trader in me. Let's keep on rolling now into what's going on in the rest of the crypto landscape. It's time to dive on into the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, welcome to the altcoin universe. This is indeed the portion of the program where we break down what's going on the other side of the fence in the altcoin realm. Spoiler alert, Bitcoin's down. Most of the major altcoin down this week as well. Coming into Showtime again, take these market cap numbers with a big grain of salt. I'm just going to quote them as they are on a place like Market Cap or CoinDesk or anywhere else. But you know these numbers are a wee bit inflated, so take them with a grain of salt. Percentage-wise, I think ranking-wise, those wouldn't change. But the total market cap, probably a bit overstated. That said, Bitcoin coming into Showtime at about 179 billion. Number two, ETH, almost exactly 30 billion, 30.01 billion. The numero trace here, Ripple with about 15.5 billion. Number four, Litecoin, 7.25 billion. And number five, Bitcoin Cash with a little bit north of 7 billion. So Bitcoin Cash and Litecoin both fighting their way back into the top five again. Interesting stuff. Let's move on to see what kind of movements we saw here over the past week. And again, it's kind of been downside all week as people are taking some profits, and it's not hard to blame them given the massive movements we've seen out there. Let's start in our old friend Ripple, aka XRP. We talked for a while. It's been locked. Seems like it's region locked here at that, in that low 30s range. It broke out of it last week, got up to the 40s, out to 46 cents this week. Gave it all back, right back down to where it was a couple weeks ago, 39 cents again. So we're back in the 30 handle, profit taking, going on out there in XRP. Still well north of that 31, 32, 33 range it was in for the better part of a year, but not exactly maintaining that 40-cent premium out there. Let's move on to ETH. ETH also down quite a bit. As of our last show, it was right around 310, coming into showtime today at about a 282. So off not quite 30 handles. We're pretty darn close out there. So again, some profit taking. ETH has been on a good run of late. If you're hitting the bid out there in ETH, hard to really blame you. Same deal for Litecoin. Litecoin, we talked about Q1, was the percentage winner by far from price increase. I haven't crunched the numbers yet for all of them here for Q2. I'm sure someone has out there. I'll have to go dig it up and see what people have determined. But Litecoin was on an impressive percentage tier for Q2 as well. Taking some of that off this week. It was at 134 last show, off about 20 handles this week, down to 114. And rounding out our big altcoin roundup here, the big downside mover this week in terms of net points. Bitcoin Cash was trading 472 as of our last show. This show, 395, so breaking through the 400 handle to the downside. Still in our top 5 there in terms of market cap, but feeling a little bit of weight, a little bit of profit taking out here. So yeah, most of the major altcoin out there this week in thoroughly red mode, profit taking mode here this week. Let's see what mode you guys are in with a little bit of your crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Crypto Questions. Again, we're going to do a little bit of a truncated show. I am technically on vacation, but hey, there's so much going on. We've got to break it down. We talked last week about the realized and implied vol on different products and which one was the winner. We asked you to pick, of course, which product had the highest 30-day realized volatility. If it was coming into this week, it would have definitely been Bitcoin with about a 90%. Of course, as when this was posted a week and change ago, it was still Bitcoin with a mere between 65 and 75%, depending on what day you looked at it there. Tesla was number 2 with about a 47.8%. The Qs were only 18.3%, and WTI was somewhere in the 40 to 60% range, depending on where you're looking out there as well. But still, Bitcoin leading the dance. Remember, this is realized vol, not implied vol. So Bitcoin seemed like it was kind of a no-brainer when we posted that, but there was actually a lot of back and forth. In fact, people actually in our audience ended up net picking Tesla with about 38% versus 30% to Bitcoin and 28% for WTI. Only 4% picking crude. No love for WTI out there. Let's see what you guys have love for this week. Linguistic. Linguistic wants to know, hey, fun show. Well, thank you, Linguistic. We try to keep it going for you, even though I'm on vacation here, because there's just so much going on. Don't worry. We'll be back in the studio next week for our usual show with all the fun stuff. Stay tuned for that. But Linguistic also wants to know, did the options show any indication? I think I meant their options show. You have a lot of option shows. Which one are you talking about? But he says, did the options show any indication of the recent massive pop in Bitcoin? Oh, no, we talked about this for a while now. In fact, we just talked on the show a few weeks ago about what probabilities the options were pricing in on the major platforms. And remember, all of them, up to Dees pretty much, were shy of 25% or just about 25% probability that Bitcoin would hit 10,000 by the end of the year. SEP was about 22%, as I recall, and Dees was at around 25%. So they were all pricing in fairly low probabilities that it would happen. But again, probability is not all. We also saw massive interest in the calls as reflected by the huge call to put ratio out there, right around, 75% or fairly close to, let's get the exact number here. It peaked at 73.4% on June 17th, so the middle of the month. Last week was 65.2%. So the bias was clearly to the calls. We saw that reflected in some of the skew numbers we talked about as well. So the skew and the calls, they were showing the interest, the concern was all predominantly to the upside. Again, you have to take that with a grain of salt. That doesn't necessarily mean a massive explosion to the upside like we saw. We did end up seeing that. So you were seeing paper out there dominant in the call wing, which probably should give you some indication. I don't know if anyone's called a move to 14,000 or pretty close to it. But we did see, yes, the answer to your question is kind of a mix. Yes, we did see bias to the calls, but that's been that case for some time. So not exactly meteoric, but it did peak right around mid-June, which is when we saw these big move set off. So that was pretty well timed from that perspective. So I guess the short answer to your question is yes, the options did show an indication for a recent massive pop, but maybe not to this degree. And certainly if you priced it out from a net probability perspective across the term structure, they were still only pricing in right around a 25% chance or less that that Bitcoin would hit 10,000 by the end of the year. So net overall, there was no exact magic bullet that said, here we go, we're going to go up to 14,000 as of last week. That did not happen last Wednesday. There was nothing that precise. But in general, again, you got to read the tea leaves of all these things. The interest in the calls, the growing explosive interest in that was at least an eye-opener that something was afoot, if not perhaps to the degree that we ended up seeing out here. What else we got here? DaPict, maybe DaPict? Let's go with DaPict. DaPict wants to know, do you think we'll get any other major exchanges leaping into the crypto markets soon? I think the short answer to that one is going to be no as well. We already kind of know what we've got, right? We've got CME with, and by major, I'm assuming you mean major regulated, listed U.S. exchanges. Overseas, all bets are off. I'm talking about the U.S. market. That's where we predominantly hang our hats here on the Options Insider Radio Network. And obviously CME, the last of the Mohegans out there. SIBO already got out of the market. They got in and they got out with Bitcoin futures. CME now firmly entrenched, as we just talked about, with the CME Bitcoin futures. I've been on them. A lot of people have been on them. I've asked them on this show. I've asked them on other shows. I've asked them at conferences and on panels. Are we going to see options or anything else anytime soon? There's a lot of hemming and hawing from them. I get the impression from them that we'll probably see more products from them rather than an option or things like that. So, and even they're the major stakeholder right now, and they seem a little reticent to add things. And then, of course, we have what ICE, I suppose you can call it a subsidiary over there, the backed spin-off subsidiary, call it what you will. They're waiting for regulatory approval, and then they're going to get into the space with the physically settled futures. So we're waiting to see on that. Of course, if you listen to this show over the course of this past year, there's a legion of, let's call them secondary players getting into the space, newer entrants, not quite the established players like a CME or an ICE, but still interesting ones to watch. ErisX, LXDX, etc. There's been so many, I've lost track of how many have been on just this program that are all coming in to the crypto derivatives exchange space and hoping to in the near future. A lot of them still predominantly focused on the overseas markets because that's where the regulatory space is the most fluid. Here in the U.S., it's still kind of a bit of a crapshoot. So I think all that a long way around to saying, do I expect any other major exchanges to leap into this in the near future? Well, if the prices keep up here and keep exploding, maybe. But given the issues we've seen with SIBO getting out of the space, seeing ICE still waiting for regulatory approval, I don't know if we'll see a lot of other major players diving in anytime soon. I think they're going to wait for the smoke to clear, wait to see if Backed and these others get their full approval and they launch an actually physically settled product. And then we'll see I think ErisX wants to go that route as well. So I think they're going to probably play a little bit of a wait and see game before we see other, you don't really say what majors you want, but other majors out there, NASDAQ kind of dipping their toes in it a little bit, but not fully committed to crypto yet. Maybe NASDAQ will dive in. They have other things they're working on right now over there. And, a few others out there. But, yeah, we're waiting and seeing, I think like the rest of you. But I think for the time being, I think people are waiting to see how the regulatory space shapes up here in the U.S. before we get other major players diving into the space that SIBO just left, quite frankly. All right, we've got time here for one more. 33 SOP wants to know, what do Bitcoin options settle into? Well, that kind of depends where you're looking, what platform you're on here. But in general, the lion's share of them tend to settle into cash. That's just easier for everybody. I've just mentioned Backed. They're looking to get into the physically settled space as well as ErisX. They'll be on the futures side first, but then eventually, hopefully, we'll have options on those. Obviously, there are no options on the CME future, so there's nothing to settle into a future there. I wish we had them, but unfortunately, no. So the lion's share are going to be cash settled. On the OTC side and some of these other venues, you could get some other ones. Some places like BitMEX and others do interesting things with perpetuals, and they may indeed have options that settle into those. I'll have to go check to see for sure. Not quite the standard futures contract we're used to here in the listed U.S. Market here. So they may have some options that settle into those, but lion's share, what you're looking at out there, are going to settle into cash. I think a lot of people want that to change in the future. They want things to be physically settled just because it lines up a lot more easily with their portfolios. And that seems to be all the firms, all the exchanges, all the new startups we talked to on this network that are getting into the space are all leaning in that physically settled type category. So I'd imagine that's going to be changing in the near future. So stay tuned, fingers crossed. Love to see, an option on the CME future. That would be great, and others like that. But we got to wait and see. For now, though, it's mostly cash with some physically settled. Hopefully coming soon. We get the regulatory approvals, and then we can get the ball rolling. Meanwhile, go overseas with your VPN if you want to trade something else outside of our regulatory domain. All right, that's going to do it for your questions. Also going to do it for this episode, this abbreviated episode of the Crypto Rundown. Again, we'll be back in the studio next week to wrap up all this craziness going on and break it all down here in the world of crypto. In the meantime, here in the U.S., enjoy the truncated holiday week, and we'll see you back next week for more of the Crypto Rundown.
The preceding program was a production of the Options Insider Radio Network. For more quality options programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app, available in iTunes and on Google Play. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.